Let's talk about prototypes, provenance, and also the Pokemon prototype Scandel. What's going on, guys? Joe R Vintage Pokemon here, and today we're going to talk about the biggest Pokemon scandal to hit the airways in a long time, and that is the prototype test print Pokemon card scandal. Yeah, recently, many of you probably are already aware, there was a significant number of graded test print prototype cards slabbed all by CGC that have been deemed fake. Upon closer inspection of the dot matrix, which is something I guess that shows up upon being printed onto cardstock, in many cases, you can use this to verify the year in which a card has been printed. And I don't know all the technical mumbo jumbo that goes with it, but basically these cards have been verified as being printed in 2024, at least a good number of the more recent ones to hit the auction block. Now, I want to make clear that not all these cards are supposedly fake. Some of them, specifically the ones that have more damage on them, which would make sense for a card that's more than 2 decades old. Some of these cards are apparently real or presumed real still at this time, but it is very unclear given how many are on the market of these prototype test print cards, these alpha, beta test prints. It's unclear how many of them are actually real versus fake, because a lot of them apparently are fake, and all of them have been graded by CGC. At least a good number of them have. There's still some that are on like uncut sheets, and it's just a big giant nightmare because these things are being sold off as if they're from 1996. And I want to take a moment to talk about something that I don't think a lot of people have really brought up yet in video, and that's that when it comes to grading cards, there are 2 things that I think people try to push, and that is provenance and evidence. And with these test print cards, there's a lot of emphasis that has been put on provenance instead of evidence, and that in itself is a problem. I have here 3 cards. First edition base set Charizard, base set Japanese Charizard, and the first Charizard to be printed on cardstock, the Cardass Charizard. All 3 of these are essentially rookies in their own right. I know that's not a no rarity, but stick with me on this. My point is, there's no provenance for where I got these cards from, but there is evidence and data to support they are authentic and real, aside from the fact that they were graded by a company, which is good, but that's not everything. We know that these cards are real because their shading is right, their font is right, the patterns on the card's right, the back of the card is correct for what it should be, the foil pattern looks right, the stamp is in the right position. These are all pieces of evidence, data that you can collect and examine and prove that a card is authentic. CGC did not do that with many of these test print cards, supposedly. They went off of, more than anything, provenance. Apparently, these cards were sourced from, or presumed source from Akabane, one of the original Pokemon creators. I don't know if he had all the cards, but I think they were presumed real primarily because he in some way vouched for the cards or signed the cards. Something gave credibility in accordance to provenance with Akabane. I don't know every little detail, but it's very clear that CGC did not do their homework as far as evidence and data collection goes, which is strange because there are other examples where they did a lot of legwork to make sure a card was authentic, when they did very little, it seems, to verify that these were not. It's funny because we have 2 other examples of this. We have the pre-release Raichu, which CGC did grade and authenticate, and they put a lot of effort into trying to match that it was an authentic, real card. And PSA didn't want to touch the pre-release Raichu. We know that because PSA didn't want to grade it based on the fact that there was very shaky provenance for it. And there's so few of them graded, which is another thing as well. These are not one-of-one cards, right? We know that there are other copies of these particular cards. That provides another set of evidence for us. But when you're talking about a one-of-one, you're relying on someone's story as to how it came to be, where it came from, why it exists at all. And PSA didn't want to touch that. And they were very smart to not want to touch these prototype test print cards either, because the provenance is very shaky. Even if it's from somebody that you 100% trust, and there's plenty of people in the Pokemon community, plenty of great people in this community that you can absolutely trust, but it goes to show that if you thought you could trust someone and then the evidence says contrary to that, well, what happens to the card? The card's authenticity goes completely down the toilet. And that's what happened here, is that everybody believed that Akabane was absolutely 100% behind all of the test prints that were being released. And at the end of the day, only a few of them ended up potentially being real, it seems. We know that there's some that are real, and a good dead giveaway is that they are damaged. They're not perfect mid-condition cards. It's funny, all the cards that we know of currently to date that are fake, besides the fact that there's evidence supporting they're fake because the dot structure or the dot matrix is telling us that they were printed in 2024. Aside from that, they're mint condition. Do you have mint condition cards that are more than 2 decades old in your binder? I guarantee you they're not. Because a card that has been stored in a binder for 20 years is going to have at least a little bit of surface scratching, a little bit of whitening, a little white dot on a corner. It's probably going to be there. So these things, I remember when I first saw them, I was like, what the hell is this? And I didn't like how it looked to begin with. But the sheer fact that these are, at least at the time, they were marketed as being kind of like one-of-ones, and they had this weird vintage, it didn't look like a Pokemon card even. And I get that because it's supposed to be a prototype, that it's not supposed to look like one of these, but still it didn't sit right. A lot of little red flags were going up and bells ringing in many collectors' heads. It actually shocks me that so many people took a risk and jumped at these to begin with. And CGC just did not do enough homework. Okay? They needed to look at these things more closely. And a lot of credit is due to the wonderful people of the Pokemon efour Elite Forum community, specifically PFM, Pokemon Flying Master, did an amazing job looking at these cards, considering that he owns some of them too. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars that CGC is going to supposedly be liable for because they authentic. I mean, the word guarantee is in part of their name, CGC, G, guarantee. They guarantee it's real. It's not. So now they're going to have to do something about it. So TCA put out a great video as well. So did SM Pratt. You can check those out. I'll put some links in the descriptions below for where you can find articles and other videos on these things. But this is just my 2 cents. If something's too good to be true, then it probably is. And you got to remember, guys, that when it comes to these trophy cards, even the most valuable trophy cards in the Pokemon TCG hobby, Trophy Kangaskhan, the #1 trainer Pikachu cards, trophy cards, there's still more than one copy. So, I mean, we're talking about prototypes, talking about like one-of-ones, only 1 or 2 things of these exist in the world. There's nothing like it anywhere else. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Make sure you do your homework. Make sure you're buying from not just a graded card company if you want something that's really expensive, but make sure you trust in the seller as well. Check feedback, check this, check that. Make sure that everything you're doing verifies that something is real, because I think a lot of people just kind of threw their money at a wall on this saying, well, when am I ever going to get a chance to own a prototype ever again? And it kind of ended up looking like having egg on your face. And I get that it was graded by CGC, but it just did not sit right. I mean, upon seeing these things, something just did not smell right with it. And I still stick to my guns even on something like the pre-release Raichu, that the provenance was just shaky. And at the end of the day, you got to look at evidence. And I don't understand why CGC didn't do more checking, more verification like they did with things like the Prototoys and the pre-release Raichu, why they skipped some of those steps with this. I couldn't tell you. And hopefully we find out soon what they're going to be doing about this whole hot mess. So that's all I've got for you guys. If you like vintage Pokemon card content, you know where to subscribe right here, Joe R. Vintage Pokemon. And again, thanks so much to people in the Pokemon Elite Forum community for doing some great research on this subject matter. Because, I mean, it's a fascinating story. But, I mean, it is just an absolute travesty that some people purchased these cards, and now they spent a lot of money in some cases. We're not talking always like 50,000, it's just a few thousand, and for some smaller time collectors, that's a good portion of their portfolio, unfortunately. So hopefully this gets remedied quick. Again, if you own any of these cards graded, do not crack it out of its slab. Hold on to it and call up CGC and ask them what the next steps for you to do are. Joe R. Vintage Pokemon. We'll see you guys all next time. Keep collecting those vintage collectibles. Bye-bye.